Is this the one?
Indeed it is. And this is Jonathan. He's going to let you drive some of his cars.
Well, not quite my cars, per se, but a mere detail. You know, I'd really rather be down there racing them myself, to be honest. I'm actually quite handy behind the wheel, but it's the downforce, those lateral Gs, you know? The old neck can't really handle it. So I need a pro. And that's where you come in. We run in a bunch of events throughout the year. Time trials, races, all sorts. And I have it on good authority that you have the ability and temperament to do well in these. Make our business look good, and most importantly, bring the cars back in one piece. So consider this a formal invitation. I'll see you at the track.
Now, I'd just like to step into my office. I'd like to go over this.
So, hello there everyone and welcome, it is Niran here, and today it is time for episode number 2, finally, of the F1 2017 career mode. I know, I'm sorry, it's been about 7 years since episode 1, but I'm trying to move out of where I live currently and into uni accommodation. This game has come out at potentially the worst possible time in the entire year for me, in terms of actually having time, so you guys are going to have to be patient just for the first week of this game being out, and then after that I'll be able to do the daily uploads that basically everyone else in the entire community is doing right now. It is a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. Hopefully it'll be resolved soon. Now, I mentioned that episode number 2 of this series was going to be a bumper-packed one, and as you can already see in the background, we're getting straight into things. We're doing a pursuit, because as you know, the classic cars have been introduced for F1 2017, and they are implanted into the career mode, so you can do invitational events. You'll have heard from the rich guy at the start in the sort of cutscene that he is inviting us to do sort of classic cars events, and this is a pursuit. So basically we've got 3 laps around a Japanese short circuit here at Suzuka to pass as many cars as we can and try and win the race in this 2006 Renault R26 against slightly older 90s cars. Now, I've already passed one car, one of the Williamses, but we actually had a lot of trouble getting past this McLaren, this Sari guy, who I assume is from Finland, getting a massive snap of oversteer there as well. And I'll let you into a bit of a secret. At this point in the race, I thought it was lap 2. As you can see at the top right, it's top 3. So currently I'm minding my own business. I can see the leader. I'm like, yeah, this is fine. I'm going to pass Kaufman on this straight, and we're going to then catch the leader and we'll be absolutely fine. Little did I know, we now crossed the line and that's the end of it. And we finished only 3rd. I mean, we were very close to 2nd in fairness. We probably only lost out by a couple of attempts there, but it was a bit frustrating that the first sort of classic invitational event that we've done, we actually failed because we finished in 3rd, and the past goal was, of course, to finish in 1st position. So a little bit of a frustrating start to this episode because I can't do simple arithmetic, apparently. But it is a bit of a frustrating thing. Hopefully we'll improve on that and we'll be able to pass one of those at the next Classic Cars Invitational. But we are today going into the Chinese Grand Prix for round number 2 of this 2017 season. Also, just quickly before we get into anything as well, the support on the first episode was phenomenal. So thank you guys ever so much for that. I really appreciate it, because obviously I wasn't one of the first people to get this series out, but you guys still smashed the support. Now, R&D is something that we talked about last episode, and we're getting into that already. This tree is very daunting at first. In fact, it looks as if you need an engineering degree from Oxford University to be able to work your way through it, but actually when it's actually applied, it's not too bad at all. And we're confirming development in durability, that's just general engine wear, and also some aerodynamic improvements as well. Mainly to the front wing, I think we did a front wing aerodynamic change. Correct me if I'm wrong, it might have been rear wing, but we've done stuff to do with the aerodynamics, because I think we're the 4th worst team on the grid when it comes to aero packages, so we need to obviously improve on that. And the new part in terms of durability and general wear on the engine and gearbox was fitted for China, because we did that during the Australian Grand Prix. The aero package won't be arriving till Bahrain, and we'll also be hopefully doing some more R&D stuff as well, and hopefully getting some more upgrades for Bahrain in the 3rd round of the season as well. So hopefully this car will be improving. I think definitely in terms of powertrain and aero at the moment is where it needs to be improved. Chassis-wise, it's not actually too bad, and then durability maybe on the MG UK is something we need to look at as well. Now, moving on into practice here in China, and we're doing the practice acclimatization, or track acclimatization program, sorry. It took us 2 attempts. We got the green score on the first lap and the purple score on the second lap, so that's 50 resource points we'll be able to use now going forward in research and development. And on the fuel saving, we do that first try, getting 50 resource points. Traditionally, as long as you short shift and lift and coast, that is a very, very, very easy sort of practice program to do. Probably the easiest out of the lot. In fact, I'm not even sure you have to do much short shifting at all. to even pass. In terms of race strategy, we did that as well in the space of 3 laps, getting 50 resource points there. Average tyre wear around a track like this with the first corner is very difficult indeed to get the purple score, so we're going to settle for 30 resource points on the tyre wear, and then on the qualifying pace as well, we're going to come around the final corner here, 5 tenths up on the time delta, and we're going to pass that at the first possible opportunity and grab 50 resource points there as well. So a very, very efficient practice session there, or a couple of practice sessions in the end, and we take home a pretty decent amount of resource points. You can see them all stacking up here in the background, getting perfect scores for track acclimatization, qualifying pace, race strategy and fuel saving, and then a pass on tyre management means we get a total of 278 resource points, adding up to 1,250 in total, which we can now use to improve the car. I think we're going to go for a powertrain upgrade next, and hopefully that will arrive for the 4th round of the season in Sochi. Moving on now to the Saturday, and the qualifying goals are to qualify 11th or higher, and also of course beat our teammate and rival currently in this career mode, Carlos Sainz, the Spaniard. We obviously qualified 16th on the grid after a mistake in an intermediate tyre session in Australia. We're hoping to improve on that going into China, and we'll see if we can do that by heading over to the qualifying report. In contrast to Australia, Q1 took place in sunny conditions for round 2 in China, but it was still Ferrari and Mercedes topping the timing sheets. Both McLarens struggled massively on Shanghai's huge back straight, whilst Toro Rosso driver Yusufu once again exited early. Q2 would belong to Sebastian Vettel, who posted a time 3 tenths quicker than the Mercedes cars. A last gasp effort from Nico Hülkenberg in the Renault saw Felipe Massa eliminated, meaning the Brazilian would have to watch his rookie teammate Lance Stroll in Q3 via a TV screen. But in a shootout full of surprises, it was Mercedes' new boy Valtteri Bottas who snatched pole from the grasp of fellow countryman Kimi Räikkönen. An astonishing lap from the Dane Kevin Magnussen saw him take 5th for Haas, whilst Daniel Ricciardo struggled to only 9th for the race for Red Bull Racing. So all of this means we have a very messed up grid for the Chinese Grand Prix, with Valtteri Bottas taking pole position ahead of Kimi Räikkönen, Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel on the front 2 rows of the grid. Kevin Magnussen took an incredible 5th place to grab Haas's best ever qualifying position in Formula 1, with Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz in 6th and 7th. Lance Stroll took a great 8th, his best qualifying in Formula 1, with Daniel Ricciardo down in P9, Nico Hülkenberg in 10th for Renault, and then Felipe Massa and Sergio Perez rounding out the top 12 for the race. So a frustrating qualifying session yet again. 16th on the grid, going out in Q1 again, beating only the McLarens and the Saubers again, means we have got a lot of work to do in the race on Sunday again. And it seems like the AI are very, very good at setting very good lap times right at the end of a session, and that's caught me out in this race, or in this session, or in this race weekend, and hopefully we won't be caught out by it again. You can see we're now embarking on the formation lap, and now the strategy for this race is an interesting one. It's going to be dry, sort of overcast for the entirety of it, but it's very much a choice between the 2-stop and the 1-stop, and intriguingly enough, both strategies can be pulled off if starting on the super soft, so we're not going to get much of an indicator as to who's doing what until literally the first pit stops. Now here's Kevin Magnussen on the screen in the Haas. You'll have seen from the qualifying report he did a very good job to qualify in P5, and there is our teammate Carlos Sainz as well, who beat the bigger brother Red Bull of Daniel Ricciardo to qualify in P7. So both those guys doing very well in qualifying, in stark contrast to us, underachieving quite massively down in P16 to the right hand side of Romain Grosjean and sat just behind Esteban Ocon. Now waiting for the grid to assemble then ahead of round number 2 of this 2017 season here at Shanghai for the Chinese Grand Prix, and the lights are now out and we are underway for round number 2. It's a fantastic start for the McLaren to our left-hand side. Fernando Alonso getting a characteristically great start, passing Grosjean. We've done the same, but we're still in P16. Grosjean trying to go right around the outside. We go underneath Alonso and Ocon, and now Jolyon Palmer. There's a car on the infield. That's Lance Stroll in the Williams, who spun it from the top 10. We've got 3 illegal overtakes under yellow flags. We're going to have to give those positions back, and the virtual safety car is now out. So we're up into P15. We've gained the place from Stroll's spin after he lost it in the Williams, but Fernando Alonso has overtaken us. We've actually got the better of the Force India driver Esteban Ocon, because I think we passed him before the yellow flag zone, but unfortunately we then went on to pass Alonso, Palmer and Grosjean under caution. This is what happened though at the start of the race. It's a great start, you know, for Lance Stroll in the Williams alongside Carlos Sainz, our teammate, and he goes up the inside of Verstappen and Magnussen down into turn 1, and he's got Verstappen there to his left-hand side, and he just drops it very slow. It's a very slow spin. It's a very strange incident there for the Canadian. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's to do with his lack of experience, but this is how it looked from Carlos Sainz. It's interesting, actually. It was 3 abreast down into turn 1. That's potentially why there wasn't enough space for Lance Stroll, who then, of course, spins into the infield, because Kevin Magnussen was actually on the outside of Max Verstappen. You couldn't see that from on board the Williams, so a case of 3 into 1 doesn't go, and unfortunately Lance Stroll is the victim of that one. The virtual safety car, though, is in now, or well, not in, it's gone. Lance Stroll has fallen to the back of the order, and his loss is our gain. We're up into P15, and shortly it's about to become P14 as we overtake Fernando Alonso very, very comfortably, even without DRS. Just the use of rich mixture against that very, very slow McLaren Honda in a straight line. They are really going to struggle, himself and Stoffel Van Dorn, in this Grand Prix and throughout the season if they don't improve the power unit in the back end of that McLaren. Kimi Raikkonen sets the fastest lap of the race, which would indicate he is leading this Grand Prix after winning the first round of the season, of course, in Australia. We come across the line in P14, and we're currently sat behind the Renault there of Jolyon Palmer, who's sparking away as we go into turn number 1. Seems if he's gone a bit wide, we're able to turn in a lot easier, and it's a simple move for Jolyon Palmer, who just goes too wide into turn 1. I think he's on the soft tyres, isn't he? So potentially just not enough grip, and we're just able to drive underneath him and take P13. Unlucky for some, we'll be hoping it's lucky for us, though, in this Grand Prix. We'll be hoping to get out of this position pretty quickly as we bear down the Haas Ferrari of Romain Grosjean down into the hairpin at the end of the back straight. We're making pretty swift progress through this order at the moment. We've passed Ocon so far, Alonso, Grosjean, and of course, Jolyon Palmer, and now Romain Grosjean up the inside of him into the hairpin and up into P number 12. And some more difficult targets coming up now, because we've got Sergio Perez in that Force India and Daniel Ricciardo. And speaking of Sergio Perez, he's actually making a move on the man in between himself and Ricciardo, and that's Nico Hülkenberg in the Renault. And that is a good move up the inside down into turn 1. This seemingly never-ending right-hand turn. Nico Hülkenberg trying to stick it up the inside, though, actually, in fairness to him. The German makes the move back up the inside into turn 2, and now it's a battle of traction and just straight grunt between the Mercedes-powered Force India and the Renault, and unfortunately for Nico Hülkenberg, the Force India is the car that comes out on top, and up into P10 goes Sergio Perez, and now into the back end of the points. In a seemingly disappointing Saturday for Force India, Perez has had to work ridiculously hard now to get into the top 10, and Esteban Ocon's way down in, I think, P14 at the moment. Now, this is a quick replay, actually, of what happened with Jolyon Palmer. And yeah, Palmer just goes too deep, just goes too wide into the corner. We're just able to easily drive underneath him. This was before we actually managed to pass Romain Grosjean, of course, and that put us up into P13 at the time. Now, of course, up into P12. Having passed Jolyon Palmer, we're now going to make movements on his Renault teammate, and the DRS is open for Nico Hülkenberg because we're now on to lap 3, or we're past lap 3 of this race, but it's not going to stop us bearing down on the German. You can see from the replay camera there, massive lock-up for Nico Hülkenberg down to the hairpin. We'll do the same as we did on Grosjean, ease him to the edge of the track, and we take P11 against the German. Nice move there on Nico Hülkenberg through the final corner, and we're up into P11. We're one place now off some championship points. We've got a decent train of cars ahead of us, being led by Kevin Magnussen in that Haas, Carlos Sainz, Felipe Massa, Sergio Perez, and Daniel Ricciardo are now in that train, and Daniel Ricciardo is now at the back of that train, having been passed by Sergio Perez. This is a long train, could I say. We've got Magnussen, sorry, at the head of it in P6, and this goes all the way down to about P14 where Esteban Ocon is. But moving on to lap 6, and we've been stuck behind this train for a decent amount of time now, and ahead of us you can see all sorts of carnage going on. Ricciardo's trying to make a move on Perez. Ahead of that is Felipe Massa going up the inside of Kevin Magnussen, who I think was the cork in the bottle here in this battle. Our teammate Carlos Sainz has now passed him and is up into P6, and ahead of us Daniel Ricciardo has now made a move on Sergio Perez to retake P9 off the Mexican driver in the Force India. So a great battle going on here. Some really good battling in the sort of upper midfield, and people sort of chopping and changing position constantly. Perez there with the DRS ahead of us. We're though going to try and potentially make a sneaky move around the outside of the Force India down into turn 1, driving straight around the outside as Perez gets a little bit held up by Ricciardo ahead of us. A little bit of contact between ourselves and the Force India driver as the hand of gesticulation goes up in the cockpit, but through we go and up into the points paying positions. Ricciardo in the Red Bull now ahead ahead of us. Ahead of that is Kevin Magnussen. Felipe Massa has now dispatched the Haas machine and is up into P7 to now chase down our teammate Carlos Sainz. At the moment, this is looking like a very good race for Toro Rosso. Carlos Sainz up in P6, and we're making a lot of movement at the moment up into the points-paying positions, and we're now making even more movement on Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bull. No team orders here. The junior team lunging it up the inside of the bigger brother car, and Ricciardo's down into P10. A little bit of oversteer on exit, and Ricciardo's now got to fend for himself against Sergio Perez as Kevin Magnussen dips into the pit lane along with Carlos Sainz and not Felipe Massa. Massa stays out because he's actually on the soft tyres, interestingly, so he, I think, is going for a slightly different strategy, potentially a one-stop. Behind the Sergio Perez in the Force India has stayed out. We are going to come in at the end of this lap, though, so basically everyone around us, apart from Perez, has got a one-lap undercut on us, and that could hurt us. So the likes of Magnussen there, Sainz, Daniel Ricciardo have all got an undercut on us, and it's definitely going to hurt us with lines like that through the corner before the back straight, that long sort of snail section corner. We've got a terrible run, and Sergio Perez has got the DRS. Of course, we haven't, because there's no one directly ahead of us, and Sergio Perez is going to easily breeze past us in that Force India, maybe trying to switch to the inside, and we're going to try and go round the outside of Perez like we did earlier on in the race, but Perez holds on. For some reason, get warning for exceeding track limits, even though we actually just went wide through the corner. Perez is through. We dip into the pit lane regardless, so that didn't really matter too much anyway, but we have lost quite a bit of time, mainly from the undercut, but also just from going wide there as we now go into the pit lane. Once again, it's a relatively cautious entry into the pit lane, in fairness, just wanting to make sure we don't get any penalties or anything that would completely ruin our race, but obviously we need to start pushing that a little bit sort of closer to the boundaries in future races. We come in for another set of the super softs, which would indicate, of course, we're going to do a two-stop strategy. The tyre wearing on this Toro Rosso isn't the worst, but it's also not the best, so at the moment I think, given Sainz, Magnussen and Ricciardo have just come in onto super softs, they're obviously trying a two-stop as well, so we're basically just copying them, doing what they do and sticking with them in the race. If anyone else wants to try the one-stop, then we'll just have to try and beat them, but the immediate people around us at least seem to be doing a two-stop, which is good to see. However, what is bad to see is the fact we've come out of the pit lane on lap 9, behind Kevin Magnussen. Okay, well, we were behind him anyway, but we're a significant distance behind him, and even further behind these two, Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo. Luckily for us, though, they've been fed out directly behind the Sauber of Marcus Ericsson, who's holding them up an absolute treat in that, in what is, well, quite possibly the worst car on the grid, realistically. So we've got a slice of luck there. Obviously, it's bad for the team generally, because it's a Toro Rosso, and of course it's a Red Bull being held up by a slower car. But in a selfish way, it's going to help us quite significantly in trying to bridge the gap to them that's now been edged out because of them getting the undercut on us. You can see even there, visibly on the screen, Kevin Magnussen was right with them. He's now right on the back of Marcus Ericsson, the Swede in the Sauber, and we're going to try and catch up to them as well. And we could potentially even use Ericsson here to try and get around Kevin Magnussen, who's going to be held up by his fellow Scandinavian driver. We're in P17 at the moment because quite a few people haven't pitted and are on the one-stop. We're driving around the outside of Kevin Magnussen, who's held up by Marcus Ericsson. Magnussen doesn't want to try the move in Sector 2, but we're going to do it anyway. We're held up by Ericsson massively through the next part of the corner, but we do in the end get past Magnussen. That's very important because Magnussen, of course, on the same strategy as us. That's a genuine net position we've gained. Obviously, we're going to try and pass Marcus Ericsson now at the inside down into his left-hander, but that doesn't mean as much. He's obviously not in our race, but Kevin Magnussen is, so that is a position gained, and now we've got to try and hunt down Daniel Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz. And I promise this is not the same clip. It's very much deja vu. This time they're passing the other Sauber. This is Pascal Wehrlein now, who's being overtaken by Sainz and Ricciardo in exactly the same fashion, but this time Ricciardo doesn't get past the German. Carlos Sainz makes it through, but Daniel Ricciardo will be held up slightly, a little bit more, though does get him down to turn 1. Speaking of turn 1, Sergio Perez has spooked us out of it because we've gone wide, because Perez is right on the apex coming out of the corner on his medium tyres, which indicates the Force India man is going to try and do a one-stop here. He's entered the fray in P12, and he's just in the way. He's just drastically in the way on those cold tyres, so we need to dispatch him quickly because we're on the super softs. We need to make this strategy work, and if we're going to beat Perez in this race, we definitely need to overtake him now. Massive lockup from Perez, but we actually lose the back end on exit, and Perez is going to try and get back at us. A little bit of contact there as we squeeze him to the edge of the track, because something that Sergio Perez knows a lot about these days. We do hold on to the position and take P12. Pascal Wehrlein is the man ahead of us, but that battling and Perez coming out of the pit lane at such an unopportune time has meant that Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo have edged away again, so the time that we gained from them being held up by Ericsson has now been lost because of this battle with Sergio Perez. You can see just a little bit of contact there, but Perez does steer into us just a little bit. There was a little bit of space, to be fair, on his left-hand side, but no harm done. We do take the position. Meanwhile, ahead of us, Pascal Wehrlein's come into the pit lane. Esteban Ocon as well in a second. The Force Indias is now in. He's trying a one-stop as well, so he's gone to the mediums. So obviously this is difficult now, because if Ocon and Perez are on one-stops, we're going to have to gain an entire pit stop on them. With Ocon, okay, it might not be so difficult. He was quite a long way behind us anyway, but Perez we were right with before the first pit stop, so that's going to be massively difficult to gain a 25 seconds back on him. It looks like we might not even have to gain any time on Esteban Ocon because he's smoking from the back end, and that Force India looks as if it's going no further in this Grand Prix, having just come out of the pit lane. So I don't know whether something's gone wrong there, whether the car has overheated in the pit lane or something, whether someone's got something wrong in the pit stop. It's not exactly a loose tyre because the engine's smoking, so I don't know whether he's overheated while sat in his box. But we're down to 19 runners, and the Frenchman Esteban Ocon is out of the Grand Prix. Meanwhile, onto lap 14, not P14, and we're trying to chase down our teammate Carlos Sainz, who, after the pit stops have shaken out, is up into P8, and we are in P9 in this Grand Prix at the moment. Now, Sainz is actually on the same tyres as us, so at the moment, a few laps later, we are actually gaining time on him via just pure pace, rather than tyre compound difference. The virtual safety car comes out for a second retirement in this Grand Prix, and that is a Sauber of Marcus Ericsson, who did such a good job in holding up Daniel Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz earlier. He's now out, so we're going to have to abide by the delta later on into lap 16, and the virtual safety car is back in for Marcus Ericsson's stricken car. We're approaching a yellow flag zone, so I imagine Ericsson's car is still out, which begs the question why the virtual safety car was even brought out in the first place if it was for Ericsson's stranded car, and now it's been brought in and Ericsson's stranded car is still there. Who even knows? But the Sauber is out, that's the main part. But you can see how visibly closer we are to Sainz. I mean, we've probably gained about 4 or 5 seconds on him in the last 4 or 5 laps, so we are really showing strong pace at the moment. Tyres are pretty worn. I think it's going to be time for our second pit stop pretty imminently, and it's very imminently in the case of Sainz, who gets the earlier pit stop once again because he's ahead of us out on the road. He comes in at the end of lap 16 to fit on. I imagine a set of softs to go to the end. That's what we're going to try and do to complete this 2-stop strategy. Meanwhile, looking at the leaders, we haven't really seen much of them in this race so far. Sebastian Vettel's come into the pit lane ahead of Lewis Hamilton. They were 3rd and 4th on the road, but Vettel has peeled into his pit box and Lewis Hamilton seemingly hasn't, and that is because Lewis Hamilton has fallen victim to what I can only imagine are new virtual safety car rules that have now claimed the time of Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton, because Lewis Hamilton was given a drive-through penalty for speeding under the virtual safety car. The same thing happened to Sergio Perez, obviously, in Australia, so I don't know what's going on there, whether the drivers haven't necessarily been briefed on how the virtual safety car works in 2017, but that's 2 people now that have fallen victim and lost a hell of a lot of time and probably a lot of points as well in this championship due to it. Meanwhile, onto lap 18, and we're now into the pit lane for our second pit stop of the afternoon. Coming out of the pit lane, releasing the pit lane limiter, Ricciardo's already pitted. He's up the road in P10. Behind us is Stoffel Van Dorn on the medium tyres. He's trying a one-stop, but we don't have to worry about him because we're already ahead of him out on the track. But interestingly enough, behind him is Carlos Sainz. We've done the overcut, ladies and gentlemen. I have absolutely no idea how. I can only imagine that Carlos Sainz has been stuck behind Stoffel Van Dorn for a long period of time, but we've done the overcut, despite Sainz doing the undercut on us earlier. So I don't know whether he had a very good in-lap or Sainz just had a very bad out-lap. But we've managed to take the position off Carlos Sainz. We're now up into P10. You can see ahead of us, though, is Jolyon Palmer. The gap to him was 11.6 seconds. It's now roughly 5. And I'll have highlighted that down at the bottom of the screen there. Daniel Ricciardo has now also got mechanical issues. So on to lap 22. Jolyon Palmer's clearly doing a one-stop because he's on the mediums right now. And the man ahead of him, Daniel Ricciardo, has also got car issues. So we've got 2 targets to try and chase down by the end of this race. Behind us is a pack of Magnussen, Sainz, and Nico Hülkenberg, and we've managed to gap them pretty comfortably. So the pace right now in this Toro Rosso is pretty good. We're beating the guys around us for pace pretty comfortably and beating them down into the ground, really, in terms of just gapping them. You can see the massive gap now on the minimap we've got on Carlos Sainz. We built that up in the space of about 6 laps, and it's probably about 7 or 8 seconds now on the Spaniard, who's stuck in a battle with Magnussen and Hülkenberg. And speaking of Hülkenberg and Renault, we're bearing down on Hülkenberg's teammate Jolyon Palmer down into the hairpin. It's a simple move on the medium tyre shod Jolyon Palmer, who now drops out of the points, unfortunately. He was running in P10 there on his one-stop strategy, but he's now down into 11th place. Hopefully that still works out for him, because I think a few guys have gone for that. I think Grosjean, which is why we haven't seen Grosjean in a while. I think Ocon is trying it, and of course, Ocon was trying it, and Sergio Perez is trying it as well. But meanwhile, this is a Haas blowing up. It's Kevin Magnussen. From that battle with Carlos Sainz and Nico Hülkenberg, well, he's exited it early because his engine's given up on him, and after a weekend that promised so much for the Dane, starting 5th on the grid, he's dropped out of the points, and now he's dropped out of the race as well. And going on to lap 26 of this race, we've obviously dispatched Jolyon Palmer now, and Daniel Ricciardo in his troubled Red Bull, which is clearly showing a lack of power output, or potentially he's got some damage, which is making that Red Bull a bit of a nightmare through the corners. But whatever the circumstance, I think it might be a lack of power output, because look at that, we breeze past that, well, it's a Tag Heuer or Tag Heuer, but it's realistically, it's Renault. It's a Renault powered car. We've got a Renault power unit in the back end of this Toro Rosso, and it was simple as you like. So massive issues there for Daniel Ricciardo, and he's actually got Jolyon Palmer bearing down on him as well. Next car up the road is Sergio Perez. Ahead of that is Grosjean. They're both on 1 stops. Perez is about probably about 6 seconds up the road, but with only 2 laps to go. I don't think we're going to be able to chase him down and take the position off him. Meanwhile, we've got Felipe Massa. He's up in P6 on a 1 stop as well, but seemingly problems for the Williams driver on the penultimate lap of the race, and the Brazilian pulls over on the back straight, and he is out of 6th position and out of this Grand Prix, and we are through past Felipe Massa because he's out of the Grand Prix. We're down to 16 runners and riders in this one, and we gain a position. We're up into P8 now from P9. Daniel Ricciardo now lifts himself up into P9, and Jolyon Palmer is now in the points as well in the Renault because of his 1-stop strategy. He's up into P10, but up in P1 is this man once again, the Iceman. Kimi Raikkonen won in Australia, wins here today in China as well. He's claimed the full 50 points for the first 2 rounds of this season, and we are rounding one of the final corners now onto the back straight here in China on the final lap of this Grand Prix. And meanwhile, behind us in the battle for P9, Jolyon Palmer is making similarly light work of Daniel Ricciardo in a similar move to us before the DRS straight even, or before the DRS zone even appears. Jolyon Palmer is up into that position. He's got a lot of marbles on his tyres though as he goes defensive into the corner, but I think he's just about got the car stopped. Daniel Ricciardo won't be able to take the position back off him, so Palmer's up into P9. We, though, ahead of him, are going to come across the line, round the final corner, and now across the line as we weave towards it. We take P8 and a valuable 4 points in the championship. You can see Palmer finishes 9th ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. 1 more lap and our teammate Carlos Sainz probably would have caught him. But here is the race winner. Kimi Raikkonen, the Finn, takes the win. You can see his teammate Sebastian Vettel there will also be on the podium as he parks himself up in Parc Ferme. And it's a good result overall for the Scuderia as they hope to win the Constructors' Championship. And they're taking a decent stride to doing that. Lewis Hamilton's having a mare at the start of the season, and Raikkonen keeps winning. Vettel's providing some points as well. And it's all looking good for the Scuderia, and obviously for the Tifosi watching back at home. And for those members of the Tifosi watching back at home, they'll have seen a very cool Grand Prix. That was a very enjoyable race, lots of action up and down the order, basically all the way through. I mean, this is a very long video for that reason. I think it was a period of more than 3 laps where there wasn't something happening in that Grand Prix in terms of overtakes, etc. But it's a finish 1-2, Raikkonen for Ferrari, and then Bottas for Mercedes first and second, with Vettel completing the podium. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull actually managed to beat Lewis Hamilton due to the Brits' drive-through penalty. Grosjean takes a wonderful P6, contrasting fortunes for him and his teammate Magnussen. Magnussen, who did so well in qualifying but then did terribly in the race, and Grosjean the complete opposite. Perez takes 7th ahead of ourselves, Palmer and Ricciardo rounding out top 10. Pretty average weekend again for Sainz in 11th ahead of Hülkenberg and Lance Stroll, who of course spun at the start of the race. He never really recovered. Here is how the driver standings are looking though. Raikkonen, unsurprisingly, is leading ahead of Bottas and Vettel. That's because those 3 have been in the same order in both Grand Prix this season so far. So unsurprisingly, that's how they line up in the Drivers' Championship. We've got Ricciardo there on 13 points. He's 4th ahead of Verstappen, who rises above Massa. Hamilton way down in 7th place. Then it's ourselves in 8th ahead of Grosjean and Ocon. Then Perez, Hülkenberg, Lance Stroll, Jolyon Palmer, and Fernando Alonso have all scored points this season. But Carlos Sainz, our teammate, still waiting. Same for Kevin Magnussen as well. But already 15 people have scored points, and already 9 teams have scored points this season. Ferrari are top ahead of Mercedes, Red Bull Red Bull Force India jump above Williams. We currently sit in 6th, and then Haas have jumped above Renault and McLaren thanks to Romain Grosjean's P6 there in the Chinese Grand Prix. You can see we've earned 123 resource points as well in the background, so we move up to 443. You'll notice there that we've gone down quite a few. That's because we've done an upgrade during the course this weekend. You'll have to wait till the 3rd episode to see what we've done. Will it be an engine upgrade? Will it be another aero upgrade? Will it be another chassis upgrade? Who even knows? You'll have to wait and see though in episode number 3, which will be in Bahrain, so make sure to check that one out. This series is going to become a lot more regular once I've moved home and I'm living back in university accommodation, I can assure you. So I do apologise for the lack of F1 videos, but I'm going to get properly stuck into, I'm going to get amongst daily uploads, so I'm going to try to anyway. But regardless of that, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of F1 2017 Career Mode. If you have, then make sure to slap a like on it and subscribe, of course, if you're new to the channel. You can follow me on Twitter as well. The handle is @theofficialFNG. It'll be on the screen and links to it are in the description below. Apart from that though, hope you guys are looking forward to episode 3 and the rest of this series. It has been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a wonderful day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.
Hope I see you next time. Said I want to be